Life doesn't come with a warning when someone is lying to you. It doesn't announce itself politely, and it doesn't give you a chance to prepare. Machiavelli understood this brutal truth long ago. People are not as loyal or as honest as they appear. Beneath polite smiles and flattering words, there is always an agenda. The question isn't whether someone is deceiving you, it's when you will realize it. Accepting this is the first step toward true power. Most people go through life expecting honesty as a default, and that's why they fall for manipulation again and again. They trust too easily, they forgive too quickly, and they believe what they want to believe. Machiavelli would call this weakness. It is the vulnerability that the cunning exploit without hesitation. Deception is not always loud or obvious. It rarely comes with the sound of a knife hitting the floor. Often, it hides behind charm, familiarity, or even acts of kindness. That's why recognizing falsehood begins with understanding human nature. People act primarily out of self-interest, fear, or desire for gain. When someone tells you exactly what you want to hear, don't take it as truth. Look deeper. Observe what they do, not just what they say. Words are cheap, but actions are revealing. The sly, the ambitious, the self-serving. These people live their lives crafting stories that make them look better than they are. Stories designed to manipulate perception while hiding intention. The first step in identifying falsehood is building awareness of these tendencies. You must train yourself to expect dishonesty in subtle forms, a hesitation before an answer, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, promises made but rarely kept. Your mind must become alert to patterns of inconsistency. This doesn't mean becoming cynical about every interaction, but it means refusing to be naive. Machiavelli would advise, don't seek illusions of trust, seek clarity in reality. The moment you accept that everyone has hidden motives, you begin to strip away the veil that conceals their intentions. Ultimately, the harsh lesson is this: people will lie, betray, and manipulate because it serves them. Some do it consciously, others unconsciously, and most won't admit it, even when caught. The only way to protect yourself is to anticipate it, to watch closely, and to cultivate the cold awareness that allows you to see deception before it reaches your heart. Life will always test you, and deception is one of its sharpest knives. Recognizing it early isn't just survival, it is power. Those who understand this law of human nature move through the world with their eyes open, unshaken, untouchable. Once you accept that deception is part of human nature, the next step is learning to separate words from actions. People will say whatever suits them in the moment. They will flatter, promise, and reassure, all while plotting to serve their own interests. Machiavelli understood that words are the easiest mask to wear. They cost nothing and often obscure the truth. But actions are far more revealing. They carry weight because they are grounded in reality. Observing what people do rather than what they say is the key to recognizing falsehood. Consider this. Someone may speak of loyalty, friendship, or support, yet their deeds tell a different story. They arrive late when help is needed, fail to follow through on promises, or avoid accountability when things go wrong. Their words are a performance, designed to manipulate your perception. Actions, however, are harder to fake consistently. Machiavelli would argue that the wise ruler studies these patterns relentlessly, discerning where intention and behavior diverge. This is not paranoia, it is strategy. The danger lies in the human tendency to believe what we want to believe. We hear comforting words and assume good intentions, ignoring subtle contradictions. A promise is spoken, and our heart wants to trust it, but the actions that follow often reveal the true nature of a person. The lesson is brutal. Trust must be earned repeatedly, not granted lightly. Watch for patterns, not just isolated events. One inconsistency may be coincidence, but repetition exposes reality. The liar reveals themselves not in what they say, but in what they consistently fail to do. Observing actions also teaches you to read motives. Someone who manipulates will often act in ways that subtly serve themselves at your expense. They may help, but only when it benefits them, or compliment you only to gain leverage. Machiavelli knew that those who can discern the true measure of people by their deeds hold the ultimate advantage. Words are fleeting, but actions leave traces, patterns, habits, and consequences that cannot be easily erased. To apply this, begin a disciplined practice. Whenever someone speaks, note what they do immediately afterward. Compare their promises to results. Ask yourself, is this behavior consistent with the values they claim? Over time, a map emerges, an unvarnished view of who is honest, who is self-serving, and who is actively deceiving. Your judgment becomes sharper, your intuition stronger, and your awareness more tactical. When you rely on actions over words, you stop being manipulated by illusions, and you step closer to the clarity that Machiavelli prized above all. Once you've learned to judge people by their actions rather than their words, the next layer of perception involves noticing the subtle signs of betrayal. Machiavelli knew that most treachery isn't loud or obvious. It's whispered in half-truths, hinted through hesitation, or concealed in small, seemingly insignificant gestures. Betrayal often creeps in quietly, wearing the guise of normalcy. To detect it, you must train your mind to observe not only what is done, but how it is done, and how it aligns, or fails to align, with the patterns you've already recognized. Look closely at inconsistencies in behavior. Someone who suddenly becomes evasive, who avoids direct answers, or who shifts blame subtly may be revealing their true intentions without realizing it. Machiavelli emphasized that human nature is consistent in its self-interest. If a person benefits when you fail, even slightly, notice it. A fleeting smirk, a glance when they think you aren't looking, a hesitation to speak truthfully. These are not coincidences. They are pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, reveal the bigger picture of hidden motives. Pay attention to overcompensation. People who lie or plan betrayal often try to mask it with excessive charm, unnecessary generosity, or exaggerated loyalty. They are aware, on some level, that their actions may betray them, and they attempt to overwrite suspicion with performance. Machiavelli would remind you that humans are not only predictable but also transparent if you study them patiently. Subtle overreactions, repeated reassurances, and inconsistencies between tone and action are all warning lights. Another critical sign is emotional manipulation. Betrayers frequently try to make you doubt yourself. They plant seeds of guilt, shame, or uncertainty to obscure the reality of their intentions. If someone's words make you question your own judgment or values, pause and examine the context. True allies reinforce your clarity and confidence, even when delivering difficult truths. False friends or manipulators seek control over your perception, not your well-being. Finally, watch for patterns over time. A single suspicious act may be accidental or contextual, but repetition is deliberate. Machiavelli believed that mastery over human affairs requires the patience to observe, not to react impulsively. Betrayal rarely announces itself. It accumulates silently, leaving traces in how a person behaves consistently across situations. The mind trained in observation will notice the rhythm, the deviations, the unspoken cues that reveal the reality behind appearances. Detecting subtle signs of betrayal isn't about cynicism, it's about preparation. The world is unforgiving to those who ignore patterns and dismiss intuition. By observing quietly, connecting small clues, and trusting the evidence of repeated behaviors, you build a shield against manipulation. Each insight is a step closer to mastering perception, a skill Machiavelli deemed essential for anyone who refuses to be controlled by others. After recognizing subtle signs of betrayal, the next step in understanding human nature is learning how to test loyalty. Machiavelli taught that loyalty is rarely freely given. It must be observed, measured, and, when necessary, provoked. People reveal their true allegiances not in moments of comfort, but under pressure. True loyalty is a quiet, consistent force that persists even when temptation, fear, or opportunity arise. False loyalty, however, collapses the moment it is challenged. To test loyalty, start with observation under stress. Notice how individuals respond when they are asked to do something inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unpopular. Are they supportive, or do they retreat? Do they show initiative in defense of your interests, or do they hesitate and calculate only their personal gain? Machiavelli understood that a person's character is not revealed in words, but in choices made under duress. The moment of discomfort is the lens that exposes intentions, because it strips away the luxury of performance. Another method involves subtle challenges. You don't need to create conflict or confrontation, but small tests of integrity can illuminate the truth. Do they keep promises made privately and publicly alike? Do they guard your confidences, or does gossip slip from their lips? Do they remain consistent when no one is watching? Every small decision in their favor or against you is a brushstroke painting the true picture of loyalty. Watch for opportunism. The world is full of people who will smile in your presence while quietly maneuvering for their advantage. Machiavelli emphasized that self-interest often drives human behavior more than virtue. A loyal person will act in alignment with shared values and commitments even when it costs them something. A disloyal person will bend, compromise, or exploit whenever it serves them. Patterns, once observed, are unmistakable. Testing loyalty also means understanding motives. Machiavelli recognized that loyalty rooted in fear or dependency is fragile. A person loyal only because they need something from you may perform admirably until their needs are met, or until a more enticing opportunity arises. True allies act from conviction and respect. They remain reliable when nothing is to be gained and everything might be lost. Finally, remember to remain discreet. Loyalty tests should be subtle, designed to observe rather than provoke unnecessary conflict. The goal is clarity, not alienation. Machiavelli would argue that knowledge of human behavior is power. Knowing who truly stands with you allows you to navigate life strategically rather than emotionally. By cultivating patience, observation, and careful testing, you separate the allies who strengthen your position from those who would quietly undermine it. Understanding and testing loyalty is the bridge between recognizing falsehood and mastering perception. It prepares you to navigate relationships without being blindsided, teaching you that trust is earned, verified, and never assumed. Once you have tested loyalty and observed the subtle signals of betrayal, the next step is mastering the art of listening. Machiavelli believed that true understanding of people comes not from speaking, but from observing and absorbing everything they reveal, intentionally or unintentionally. Words are tools. Silence is the canvas upon which truth is painted. To recognize falsehood in others, you must first become a master of listening, of noticing what is said and what is left unsaid. Listening is not just hearing. It is decoding the underlying intentions behind words. People often hide their motives, sugarcoat their actions, or use flattery to mask deceit. By paying attention to tone, hesitation, and repetition, you begin to discern authenticity from performance. A person who speaks with consistency between words and actions builds trust. A person whose stories shift or whose explanations multiply reveals cracks in their truth. Machiavelli understood that these cracks, however small, are the blueprint of deception. Equally important is listening for emotional cues. People often betray themselves through unconscious signals, a flicker of discomfort, a pause too long, or an overemphasis on reassurance. These are the subtle fingerprints of falsehood. A skilled observer does not confront immediately, but stores these signals, comparing them across time and situations. Each interaction becomes data, a puzzle piece in the larger picture of someone's character. Active listening also involves asking indirect questions, provoking thought without revealing your own assumptions. Observe how they answer. Do they deflect, exaggerate, or maintain clarity? Do they take responsibility for failures, or shift blame onto circumstance or others? True loyalty and honesty respond with straightforwardness. Deception, however, thrives in vagueness and rationalization. The careful listener spots these patterns before they become crises. Moreover, listening teaches patience. The world rewards those who act with knowledge rather than impulse. By gathering information silently, you accumulate power. Machiavelli would remind you that the man who reacts first is often reacting blindly. The man who waits, observes, and deciphers moves with precision. Your mind becomes a vault of insight, allowing you to anticipate betrayal and manipulate outcomes before others can act. Finally, the art of listening is also about restraint. Do not respond emotionally to every revelation or suspicion. Maintain a mental ledger, track behaviors, and let patterns emerge naturally. Silence is your ally. By listening more than you speak, you allow others to reveal themselves, often against their own intentions. In mastering listening, you build a lens that separates truth from illusion. This skill transforms everyday conversation into a tool of discernment and strategy. Listening is not passive. It is active intelligence, the foundation of psychological insight that Machiavelli considered essential for survival and influence. Building on the art of listening, the next step in discerning truth from falsehood is recognizing hidden agendas. Machiavelli's brutal insight into human behavior is that most people act not from loyalty or morality, but from self-interest. Every gesture, compliment, or request may carry an unseen purpose. The challenge is learning to see beyond appearances and decode the motives that others hope to keep concealed. Hidden agendas rarely announce themselves openly. Instead, they move through subtle manipulation, a suggestion that seems harmless, advice that appears beneficial, or favors that feel obligatory. At first glance, these actions may seem generous, but Machiavelli warns that power is never given freely. It is always exchanged. When observing someone, notice what they stand to gain in every interaction. The silent, often invisible calculus of self-interest is where deception resides. One key indicator of hidden agendas is inconsistency between public and private behavior. Someone may speak kindly or show concern in front of others, but act differently when unobserved. These inconsistencies are signals, small cracks in the mask that reveal the underlying intent. Another sign is over-eagerness. People who push too hard for trust, for validation, or for access are often covering something they wish to manipulate. Their insistence, subtle or overt, is a signal of strategy, not sincerity. Recognizing hidden agendas also requires understanding the emotional leverage people use. Compliments, guilt, or appeals to fear are tools of influence. Those who act purely out of self-interest will often exploit your desires, weaknesses, or sense of duty to advance their goals. Machiavelli emphasizes that the wise man does not react immediately, but analyzes. Who benefits if I act in a certain way? Who stands to lose? Who orchestrates this for their advantage? Asking these questions constantly sharpens your perception of motives hidden beneath a veneer of friendship or civility. The key to mastery is patience. Do not confront every subtle manipulation at once. Instead, let patterns emerge. Observe repeated behaviors, track inconsistencies, and note the timing of favors or advice. Hidden agendas are most visible when someone believes you are unaware. Your silence, composure, and calculated attention become instruments that expose their strategy. Ultimately, the ability to recognize hidden agendas turns everyday interactions into a battlefield of insight. By understanding the true motives behind words and actions, you gain foresight and control. Machiavelli teaches that this knowledge is power. The man who sees the game before it is played can act decisively, while the naive remain pawns in a world of calculated ambition. Building on the awareness of hidden agendas, the next frontier in recognizing falsehood is understanding emotional manipulation. Machiavelli's unflinching view of human nature reminds us that people rarely deceive through words alone. They weaponize feelings. The cunning know that emotion clouds judgment, bends morality, and compels obedience. To detect falsehood, you must first see how others try to influence your emotional state. Emotional manipulation can appear as flattery, guilt-tripping, fear-mongering, or even staged vulnerability. Each tactic is a calculated move to bend your perception or action to the manipulator's advantage. The manipulator often crafts scenarios where your empathy or desire to belong becomes a lever, pushing you to act in ways that serve them, not you. Machiavelli's cold truth is that the more invested you are emotionally, the more controllable you become. A key sign of manipulation is sudden intensity. Someone who switches between extremes, excessive charm followed by subtle threats or dramatic sorrow, is testing your emotional responses. They observe what triggers anxiety, defensiveness, or compliance, and then exploit it systematically. Another red flag is disproportionate reaction. When someone overreacts to minor slights or exaggerates gratitude, it often masks their strategic objective rather than reflecting genuine feeling. To counter emotional manipulation, the first requirement is self-mastery. You must learn to observe your own responses as objectively as you observe others. Recognize when your anger, guilt, or fear is being activated, and pause before reacting. The goal is not to suppress emotion entirely, but to refuse to hand it over as a tool for someone else's gain. Machiavelli emphasizes that control over your internal state is the foundation of control over external threats. Another essential tactic is to track consistency. True intentions manifest in patterns, not isolated incidents. Those who manipulate emotionally will repeat subtle coercions, often under the guise of care, friendship, or duty. Keeping mental records of behavior, noting recurring themes, and questioning the benefit to the other party reveals the strategy behind their emotional performance. Finally, cultivate silence and measured response. The manipulator thrives on immediate, instinctive reactions. By responding slowly, Calmly and strategically, you turn their weapon back against them. The one trying to control you is now exposed to your discernment. Machiavelli's brutal lesson is clear. The man who controls his emotions controls the battlefield. Building on the awareness of emotional manipulation, the next layer of recognizing falsehood is understanding patterns and predictability. Machiavelli taught that humans reveal themselves over time, not in isolated actions, but through repeated behavior. If you observe carefully, the truth of someone's intentions is written in the consistency of their moves, the rhythm of their choices, and the invisible threads connecting one action to the next. People who are false rarely act randomly. Their deceptions follow a rhythm designed to benefit themselves while keeping you unaware. They may shift alliances, strategically omit truths, or deploy charm selectively to gain influence. The key is noticing the repetition, the subtle cycles that signal their strategy. Patterns may appear as repeated excuses, predictable emotional triggers, or consistent overpromises followed by underdelivery. These recurring motifs are the footprints of hidden agendas. Predictability is another powerful tool. False individuals often rely on your responses to guide their next move. If you react the same way every time, defensive, fearful, or overly accommodating, they exploit that predictability. Machiavelli's insight reminds us, the one who masters their own response becomes unreadable and therefore unassailable. To detect deception, you must break your own patterns, vary your responses, and observe how others adjust. The way someone reacts to your unpredictability often exposes their true motives faster than words ever could. Tracking patterns also requires patience. Many falsehoods reveal themselves slowly, over days, weeks, or even months. The manipulator may not act overtly at first, but tests boundaries incrementally, gradually expanding their control over your perception or decisions. Keeping a mental log of interactions, noting inconsistencies, and cross-referencing past statements helps illuminate the underlying design. Machiavelli would call this methodical observation the foundation of strategic power. You cannot fight what you cannot see clearly. Finally, remember that patterns are not just behavioral, they are emotional and psychological as well. Observe what triggers loyalty, fear, or guilt in them, and how they attempt to engineer these triggers in you. When you recognize the cycle, you break the manipulator's leverage. They depend on repetition and predictability. You depend on awareness and deliberate choice. By mastering patterns, yours and theirs, you move from being a reactive participant to a strategic observer, untouchable in both thought and action. As we move from understanding patterns and predictability, the next principle in uncovering falsehood is the power of silence and observation. Machiavelli's harsh truth about human behavior is that words often mask intent, but silence exposes it. When you refrain from speaking impulsively and choose instead to watch, the world begins to reveal itself. The manipulative and deceitful cannot hide forever. Their actions, their reactions, and even their pauses betray them. Silence is a mirror. In conversation, when you stop reacting immediately, you give others space to reveal their true motives. Lies are often designed to fill gaps, but when you withhold the gap for a moment, the deceit struggles to maintain coherence. The deceiver will often overcompensate, adding unnecessary details, or rushing to justify themselves. By simply observing, you start collecting data that words alone could never provide. Machiavelli knew that rulers thrived not by speaking most, but by listening, watching, and letting others reveal their weaknesses voluntarily. Observation is also about attention to subtle details, body language, micro-expressions, timing, and consistency with past behavior. Someone who smiles when they lie, shifts their eyes, or hesitates inconsistently is giving away the truth beneath their polished exterior. The environment also speaks. Who they interact with, how they respond to authority, and the pattern of their social exchanges often reflect their hidden agendas. The skilled observer turns these fragments into a coherent map of intentions. Moreover, silence allows you to test reactions. Withholding information, leaving questions unanswered, or creating subtle ambiguity forces others to reveal themselves. The manipulative are rarely patient. They attempt to control or provoke you, exposing their tactics in the process. In contrast, the truthful remain steady and unaffected by these small tests. By mastering silence and careful observation, you create a space where truth emerges naturally and falsehood becomes conspicuous. Ultimately, silence is not passivity. It is strategic control. It's a disciplined pause that transforms you from a participant in others' games to a master of the narrative. Machiavelli's brutal insight is that those who cannot be read cannot be manipulated, and those who observe without speaking hold the power to act decisively. The world will try to fill your silence with pressure, distraction, or provocation, but the unbroken mind knows that quiet is where clarity lives, and observation is the lens through which deception dies. After mastering observation, understanding patterns, and uncovering hidden motives, the final piece of the puzzle is acting with discernment. Machiavelli's brutal truth about people is that knowledge alone is powerless without decisive, calculated action. Recognizing falsehood is only the first step. How you respond determines whether you remain a pawn in others' games or become the architect of your own life. Acting with discernment means never reacting impulsively to provocation or deception. The world is full of individuals who test your boundaries, manipulate your emotions, and seek advantage through subtle coercion. A hasty response to their deceit, fueled by anger or the need to prove yourself, hands them control. Discernment requires patience, a clear mind, and the ability to weigh every possible outcome before moving. Machiavelli's harsh counsel reminds us that power is not won through visible struggle but through quiet, deliberate strategy. It also means setting boundaries with precision. Those who have revealed themselves as false or opportunistic cannot be allowed unfettered access to your energy or your plans. Protecting your inner circle is not about arrogance. It's about survival and efficiency. Discernment teaches you when to act, when to step back, and when to let someone expose themselves fully before deciding their fate in your life. Each decision becomes a measure of your mastery over circumstance, not a reaction to it. Importantly, discernment is rooted in clarity and detachment. When you no longer attach your peace to the approval or deception of others, you gain the freedom to act without fear. You respond with precision rather than emotion, and each move carries weight because it is calculated, not impulsive. Machiavelli emphasizes that a ruler's true power lies in controlling perception and outcomes simultaneously. In life, the same principle applies. By acting discerningly, you shape how others interact with you, often without them realizing it. Finally, discernment allows you to convert awareness into advantage. Every deception detected, every hidden agenda uncovered, becomes a tool to navigate life strategically. Falsehood no longer threatens you because you've trained yourself to recognize it, and you've cultivated the discipline to respond in ways that maximize control and minimize vulnerability. In essence, you become untouchable, not through confrontation, but through intelligence, patience, and deliberate action. The journey of recognizing falsehood ends not in cynicism, but in empowerment. Machiavelli's cold truth is that people will deceive, manipulate, and betray. It is inevitable. But by combining awareness with strategic action, you transcend their games. You move with calm authority, make decisions that protect and advance your interests, and ensure that no lie, no manipulation, no falsehood ever breaks your mind or your will again.